Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So this week's video is going to be how I made this latest doll. His name is Pikka, the Aurora unicorn. So this one's been snapped up relatively quickly, but it's a little doll. It has a wire armature inside. I wanted to do a black unicorn with a bright sort of mane, so I have this faux fur left over. Haven't got too much left, but it always reminded me of like an Aurora, so I thought it would really look pretty striking against just black fur. I usually do my manes on the unicorn quite short as well, but maybe I'll do a longer one in the future, and I always do long tail as well. So it's got a epoxy sculpt horn that I went for a realistic color. I also added some a little rein, I guess, which you can take off. I made that myself as well, and he's got painted eyes. So yeah, like I said, this one is already snapped up, but I have heaps of different things in my shop, including dolls and different Aurora paintings and stuff as well, if that's what you're into. So yeah, check it out at creaturesofnat.com, and if you want to see how I made him, then keep watching. Alright, so I previously made this little horn using epoxy clay that I had left over from another little project that I was working on. So usually when I have leftover epoxy, I make some little horns that I can attach to any future dolls. So it's a good way to not waste any epoxy that you've made and you've made too much. So I thought I would attach it to this little unicorn horn as a unicorn horn, and so I added a little bit of freshly made epoxy to the end of the horn, and then I then sculpted the rest of the horn onto the resin cast of the unicorn, and just making sure that I'm really working it into the resin so it adheres properly. Epoxy sculpt cures overnight basically, and it cures it kind of like as kind of hard as a rock, I guess, but you can sculpt it once, or carve it, I guess, once it's hardened. So this is what it will look like once it's been hardened, but I will paint it up. But yeah, always a good little tip to do when you have leftover epoxy or even leftover polymer clay. So once that's all dry, I painted the horn a base coloured white, just with a primer, and then I can start painting all of the little bits that need to be painted. So I start off with the eyes. I decided I want blue eyes for this unicorn. I thought it would stand out against the black and also draw out some of the colour from the mane that I'm going to be using. So for painting these, I am using a water-based acrylic paint by the brand Chromacryl. You can find any water-based acrylic paint in your local area. This is just an Australian brand that I can get locally. So basically for the horn, I decided to paint it a realistic sort of bone colour. So what I did was I painted the base of the horn just a plain white, and then while that's still wet, I can start painting in other colours very, very lightly and blending it into the wet white paint. So this is a good way to blend your colours while everything's still wet, and you also don't end up using mixing up a lot of paint, I guess. So I added I think it was a yellow oxide colour to the white, and you see how it sort of gave it a little bit of a bone coloured effect. And I sort of concentrated that around the base and also the spirals of the horn. I then went in with some burnt umber and sort of enhanced those little spaces around there. And then once that's sort of dry a little bit, I'd say that the paint's a bit more tacky rather than completely wet. I go in with that yellow oxide again and just paint over those little all the little details, and it really brings out the bone color. And then once that's painted in, I'll go over with a little bit of white again, just to clean up all of those edges and stuff. So you can see how it turned out to be a pretty good bone color. So yeah, I plan to do that with a lot more horns as well, so it's really fun painting bone colors. Next, once that's dry, I can move on to painting all of the other bits. So For this unicorn, we're going to do a black, so I'm just concentrating around the areas that need a little bit more concentration and steady hand, like around the eyes and also the nose and the mouth. Using that same chromacryl paint, just carefully painting some of that black, and then also painting in the nostrils and stuff to get all of the white bits coloured in. I end up painting the whole head in black just because when I add the faux fur, it's a lot easier to see a white undertone than a black one. So if you're having trouble with anything seeing through when you apply the faux fur, so I suggest painting the base, the colour of the faux fur. That will really help with any gaps that you are finding or any problems you're getting with show through. I find painting it black, I usually only do blacks, or if I want a pink undertone, that works as well. I'll paint the resin cast pink and then add some faux fur, and you can see that little pink undertone showing through that faux fur. I also painted in the eyes here using a bigger brush than normal. I recommend using a dry brush technique if you're painting eyes. That way you can achieve a nice soft edge on those pupils. But have a go on paper as well and see how well you can paint little pupils using a dry brush technique. If you're not confident enough to paint on your doll, you can always wipe it off as well. Next, the same deal with the hooves. So this is a resin cast again, from a long time ago actually, but they work really well for these unicorns. So I'm just painting it up black again using that same chromacryl paint and leaving that to dry. If you're painting little tiny bits like this, you can stick your resin pieces to a stick or something using some blue tack, or I don't know what you call it in the States, but we call it blue tack, and it gives you a nice stick to hold when you're painting. Moving on to the faux fur. So for this one I'm using a black faux fur and then a little bit of leftover coloured faux fur that sort of looks like an Aurora. I thought it would work really well for that. So these are patterns that I made a little while ago, drawing them onto the backing of the faux fur using some chalk. I generally only used chalk when you are working with black faux fur because it really sees through. If not, you can just use some grey lead or a pencil or something like that. I'd recommend not using a heavy texture because sometimes you can have a bleed through of the texture. So something to note when you're drawing your patterns out. So I'm just cutting out a rough sizing of what I've drawn, and then I'll go and cut it out further when I get to sit down. Same deal with the that Aurora faux fur that I'm using. So I'm only using a small bit of this, so I'm just cutting out a straight line of it, and that'll be the tail and the mane. So when you get better at cutting faux fur, you can quickly cut it like I can without cutting the pile, but just take it slow to begin with. So a little look at the faux fur that I'm using. I'm using this black one. It's a sort of medium length faux fur. It's quite thick, but it's not the thickest that I've used. And try not to get confused with your body patterns when you've drawn it out like I have. Just make sure you know where you're cutting before you actually cut it. So I use a small pair of sharp scissors to cut out my bodies. I like using that method because I can slip the little blades in between the pile, and I'll end up just cutting the backing. So once that's all cut out, I pin it first side together, and for this instance I am using a sewing machine to sew the body up. Seeing as this body is quite small though, I'll need to leave a fair bit of opening gaps so I can turn it the right way around. So I basically left all of the legs open and the back end open, but I've also left the neck area open this time because it is quite a thin neck, and then I'll just go ahead and sew it up by hand when I put the doll together. So this is what we have once I've sewed everything up on the sewing machine. You can see how much I've left open and how small the body is, so that's why I will need to leave the leave openings a bit bigger, especially if you've got thick faux fur. It makes it a bit difficult to flip it the right way around. So this is what we have. You can always use just a blunt tool. Don't use anything metal to just coax it through if you're having trouble flipping it around. I use that timber tool that you can see on the right there. It's really great because it's got a really blunt edge, so I can sort of just help it come through. next I can start sewing everything up. So the rest of this will be sewn up by hand. So I'm sewing up the tail end here, and I decided to do a long tail for this one. I quite like the long tails rather than small tails, but I have done small tails before. The reason why I didn't sew this up on the sewing machine is because the smaller the tail, the harder it is to flip it the right way around. So I tend to just sew it by hand. I mean, it takes longer, but it's less stressful, I guess, trying to get the right way through. And then the same deal with the mane. So what I've done is I've sewed the mane over on itself, so it's a double edge piece of faux fur, and then I can sew it up onto that open end of the neck. And I'm always using a ladder stitch when I sew these together, so it will give you a nice flush seam and you won't see any stitching anywhere. So once that's done, the mane's a little different from sewing everything else. You need to make sure that everything's in place and everything is hidden. So this little extra loose end I can tuck in and then secure it with a ladder stitch, and it will work. Moving on to the legs, the same deal. Again, sewing it up with a ladder stitch. This is once I've already made the armature and attached the pieces. Tutorials for that can be found in my shop at creaturesofthenet.com. I know I get a lot of questions about armatures and attaching things, so you can find the tutorials in my shop if you want to know how. So once that's all sewn up, I am securing the thread and placing it inside of the leg, so that way there won't be any loose ends. Once that's done, I can use my tacky fabric glue, which I put into the ends of the fabric, and then I can attach it to the resin. This glue works quite well with faux fur and resin. It sticks really strongly, I guess. I usually leave it for a few hours to dry properly, and then overnight to fully cure. So this is what it looks like once everything's sewn up. It needs a bit of a trim, so I'll give it a trim and add any little details that I want to add. I add some fur to the face as well. I decided to add some reins to this one, so I just use a little bit of jewelry, chain and loops. Pretty simple. I can make a tutorial on making reins if you are unsure, but yeah, just let me know in the comments and I will make a tutorial. So this little one is available in my shop, creaturesofthenet.com. I have payment plans available, so let me know. Send me a message if you need to do a payment plan. But anyway, thanks to my Patreons for supporting me. I really appreciate it. You can find the link in the description and a link to my shop in the description too. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.